The beef industry is very important in Australia, employing hundreds of thousands of people and generating billions of dollars every year. Less well known is the courage and tenacity of many pioneering cattle women. But one 70-year-old Queensland beef producer believes it's time for the stories of the industry's quiet achievers to be told. The opening 2 days of Brisbane's royal show, known as the Ekka, are all about beef cattle. With soothing, tickling sticks in hand, producers take over the centre ring in search of a prestigious blue ribbon. This cattle mecca was the perfect setting to launch a new book profiling 28 women in the beef industry.
And we'd just like to highlight that really Cattleman doesn't have a gender. And
the man behind Cattleman in Pearls is Ian Galloway, a 69-year-old beef producer from Roma in Queensland. He and his wife Anne hired 5 writers to find the women and tell their stories.
We need to recognise and to celebrate our women folk that are in the country, running their own operations in a lot of cases, supporting their husbands, really there. And there's a lot of women. This is just 28 out of 2,800 women out there that are doing exactly that.
Because Ian had the vision that he wanted to record the history of the women that he knew so well in the industry that have had such an impact.
The first reaction of many of the subjects was, why me? I'm not special. Girlie Goody, for one, couldn't understand why she was included.
And I thought, do I really want to do this? Because there's an awful lot of other women out there that have done an awful lot more than I've done. And I've done it because I like doing it, and I can't see any good reason to stop.
78-year-old Girlie has been running her own operation at Monto in central Queensland since buying one of her 5 brothers out in the late 70s.
Well, I was pretty unlucky. I ran into a very chauvinistic bank manager who thought because I was a single woman I couldn't do it. And I had to wait 6 weeks before he said no. And then 2 of my brothers stood guarantor for me, and we got it. And I had my no mortgage party in 10 years, and in November it'll be 40 years since I took over.
Did you invite the banker to the party?
Nah.
So she was the one that I picked out early to be in the book, and really to be amongst her 5 brothers, raising cattle herself. Her father a jockey. Girlie's done a bit of jockeying as well. You know, just amazing. And a little girl from Mungungo, and really a great story.
Girlie runs her 3,200 hectare property on her own. She's also very competitive, winning many carcass competitions.
It just seems to be getting, better and better each year. Last year she took out, some major awards here at the Ekka, and no one is more thrilled with each success than Girlie. I grew up in the same area that Girlie grew up in, and I guess, she's always she's sort of part of the furniture, but she's an amazing, unique, enthusiastic, successful individual, and she wouldn't think of herself as a role model, but she definitely is.
Can you imagine not being in the beef industry?
No. It's better to wear out than rust out.
Yeah, but it was wonderful to think about those days. Yeah.
Another Queenslander, Alison Atkinson, has just retired after nearly 50 years running stud and commercial Droughtmaster operations. Alison's daughter is Gail Shan, who you may remember from the ABC's Australian Story. Gail had one arm torn off and the other crushed in a fencing accident. She followed her mum into the business and runs cattle with her husband Mac in central Queensland.
Back in 1965 and 67 I showed cattle in the north, and then caught a goods train from Cairns to Brisbane with the show cattle, and took 3 days to come here, and I was the only human on the train besides the driver.
It's not hard to see why Gail followed her mother. Alison grew up in Gulf country and was a trailblazer in her teens, working in mustering camps and showing cattle, always alongside men.
We were in a very isolated area in far north Queensland, and there weren't a lot of women involved back then, but I did take cattle to the Brisbane Ekka twice in 65 and 67, and there were a few women involved.
She says there weren't stories like these or about pioneering rural women when she was young.
I just wish we'd had some stories about our mothers way back, what they did. Unbelievable. Teaching us all correspondence school and God knows what, doing everything else, but it is becoming a lot more normal and a lot more women involved.
A relative newcomer, Jenny Underwood, says being profiled has finally made her feel part of the industry.
Well, I chose it by default because I married a grazier, previously from a teaching background. But interestingly, I find that handling cattle, and especially the younger cattle, is very much some of the practices that I had in the classroom. It's just I have my pupils back, but this time they have 4 legs.
As well as young women, Jenny hopes people outside the industry read the book.
There must be a lot of women out there who are wondering what the industry is about, and I use a lot of social media, which is one of the reasons I got into the book, I think. And I think things like Facebook are really opening up the eyes of people as to what exists out there in the agricultural industry, in the beef cattle industry.
For the Galloways, this year's Ekka was special. It was their 20th year of showing cattle. And unlike when they started out, everywhere in the centre ring were women of all ages. Cattle judge Tammy Robinson was delighted to have so many women in the ring with her.
I think the mining industry has taken a lot of the males out of the sector, and it's allowed women to come through and say, hey, we can do this stuff too.
As it was hard enough for her to be accepted when she started in the feedlot industry, she's in awe of the women in the book, most of whom started decades ago.
It was so hard back then. Women weren't accepted in the agricultural industry back then. And now, they work so hard. Now, these days, women get out there in front and do it themselves.
While each story is different, Anne Galloway noticed many subjects had something in common.
One thing that comes through is the influence of their fathers. A lot have had very influential fathers who have nurtured their love of the land to start with and nurtured their love of cattle and animals in general.
You funded this yourself.
because we were able at this stage in our lives, and,
yes.
and it's a wonderful thing to do for the recording the history of what the women of the bush have been doing over the years.
Why does that make you emotional, Anne? Tribute to Anne, or...?
Not bugging me right up.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. I guess we've had a good life in the land. It's been tough. We've had our trials and bank managers and all those things, 22% interest, all of those sort of things. And we're at the end of our time in the bush, but we'll always be there. But we're end of our... And yes, we've been able to have a little spare cash to put towards it.
Amanda Salisbury says the book is just the tip of the iceberg and hopes other industry elders will follow the Galloways' generous lead and commission follow-ups.
What do you think people will get out of the book?
I think they'll find someone within the book, because it's such a wide range of stories that really resonates with them. I think they'll find women that have come from all kinds of backgrounds, not necessarily all the same, not all necessarily stud, but they'll find stories within each story that will speak to them.